Guys, I don't want to reveal my identity in this story. I've been a truck driver for a freight company for 10 years and I live in Floyd, Virginia. During all this time on the road, I've seen many scary and strange things. Sometimes, it didn't even need to be night for me to encounter the supernatural. On one occasion, I was planning to leave early since I didn't have any deliveries scheduled for that afternoon. However, at the last minute, I was informed of an urgent request that needed to be delivered that day. My supervisor handed me the paperwork and said that the load had to be delivered by 10 p.m. The order, which we received late in the afternoon, had to be delivered urgently. I was suspicious of this situation because I thought my supervisor was targeting me. That's why I've decided not to mention any names here. I suspected that these urgent deliveries could have been done the next day, but I didn't want to argue and cause trouble with my boss. I had no other option but to get the truck on the road. After driving for a while, I noticed something very strange, but didn't think much of it at first. I saw some dogs running along the shoulder of the road and they wouldn't stop following me. I found it very odd, especially since there were no houses nearby. The area was completely isolated, but I shrugged it off and continued my journey, my mind occupied with other things. After a few minutes, further ahead, I saw a strange woman sitting by the side of the road. I thought for a moment and decided to stop to see if she needed any help. As I slowed down and approached, I realized that the woman I had seen from a distance was actually an elderly lady. In all my years of work, I had never seen an elderly woman sitting by the side of a deserted road, especially at night. It didn't seem right, so I decided to stop and ask what she was doing there, so far from the city. She told me she had been attacked by several dogs and cats and had been bitten by them. She said she couldn't walk and was very tired, asking for help. I immediately got out of the truck to assist her. I thought of taking her to the hospital first before continuing with my work. Company rules stated never to give rides to strangers, but this was an emergency. Anyone would help an injured, elderly woman in a deserted road. It would be negligent to leave her there alone in the middle of nowhere, risking her not surviving the injuries. When the lady got into the cabin, I didn't notice anything unusual, just that she was very hurt. During the trip, I asked what she was doing there, so far from the city, but she didn't respond, just stayed silent. Thinking she wouldn't answer, I asked another question. What was her name and where did she live? Again, she ignored me and didn't respond. To avoid bothering her further during the trip, I decided not to ask any more questions and just focus on taking her to the nearest hospital. I drove for almost an hour when the lady looked at me with a face very different from when I found her. At that moment, she looked extremely scary, almost like a different person. She started laughing hysterically and asking me to stop the truck right there. The place was still deserted and dark, and I didn't want to do that at all. The lady completely changed, screaming and insisting that I stop the truck so she could get out. Her insistence left me very confused because she wasn't the same helpless person I found covered in blood by the roadside. I thought for a moment that she had planned some kind of trap, with accomplices waiting a few meters ahead to attack me. Afraid, I ignored her screams and continued driving, determined to take her to the hospital. It could be that the bites had affected her behavior, causing these sudden changes. However, she didn't stop screaming, begging me to stop the truck and leave her there. At that moment, I noticed that her voice started to change, which only increased my fear. When I couldn't take it anymore, I stopped the truck. She got out with a diabolical smile, in the middle of nowhere, surrounded only by bushes. At that moment, I started trembling so much that I had difficulty continuing to drive. I looked in the rearview mirror, and what I saw almost stopped my heart. The same old lady was running after the truck on all fours, like a dog. I accelerated as much as I could to get away from there, leaving her behind. But I could still hear her sinister laughter inside the cabin. The next day, still scared, I told a friend and fellow trucker what had happened. What he told me made me even more frightened. According to him, that apparition always appears in that stretch of the road. It was an old woman who sometimes appeared as an elderly lady and on other occasions in the form of several dogs. He had seen her many times and said he was even used to it. Many people avoided that place at night, and several truck drivers reported seeing the same thing in the early morning hours. Another colleague said that one night, as he passed by that stretch, he saw a lady by the roadside asking for a ride. Feeling sorry for her, thinking it might be an emergency, he stopped and opened the cabin door to let her in. When the door was opened, he got the biggest scare of his life. The helpless lady who was on the shoulder now had a macabre smile and was staring at him. Without thinking twice, he shut the cabin door and sped off like a madman. As he looked in the rearview mirror to see if she was left behind, he noticed the place was deserted. The old lady was no longer on the shoulder. He wondered how she could have disappeared into the bushes so quickly. He continued watching through the mirror and, further ahead, heard a noise and felt total despair. He felt a weight on the roof of the cabin. Could that hellish woman be on the roof? He thought, trying to see something. The weight increased over time, destabilizing the truck. As he continued, the situation worsened because he felt the vehicle losing speed. "My God, what is this?" he cried out, already desperate in the cabin. The last thing he wanted was to stop on that dark road with that thing chasing him. The truck grew heavier and heavier, as if there were half a ton on the cabin roof. When he felt there was no other option, he screamed for God to help him and make that thing leave him alone. Miraculously, when he did that, the truck made a loud cracking noise, as if something had broken, and it stopped. "Now I'm screwed," he said, as the truck stopped completely and the engine turned off. Not knowing what was wrong, he managed to pull over to the shoulder, very scared, waiting to see if the woman would appear outside. But the silence was absolute. He says he didn't leave the truck until daylight. It was pitch dark in that place, and no cars passed by. He couldn't call for help because he didn't have a cell phone and was too scared to get out and be attacked. When day broke, he walked until he found a local resident to help him. He never drove through that road again and always took another route. When I heard that story, I also followed his example and stopped going through there. Sometime later, I insisted on learning the legend behind it. What I discovered, I didn't have the courage to share here. Maybe one day, I'll decide to reveal the truth behind that apparition. Until then, I wouldn't wish that experience on anyone.